Welcome back to the long hair unicorn layers. They're called unicorn layers because you pull the hair to the center front and the position and the angle is much like the horn of a unicorn. So hopefully that will help you remember where the direction that we're doing the layers. But first we want to get the hair nice and smooth. I prefer cutting kids' hair dry. It's just easier to work with when it's dry, and you can see what you're doing easier. So I'm going to start with a round brush blow dry. I'm using a natural boar hair brush with a mahogany handle. I'm going to start my round brush just like normal. The goal is to make it smooth and straight. And I want her hair has a little bit of wave in it, so I want those ends nice and straight. So we're going to really turn the brush or spin it through the ends and use the heat of the blow dryer to smooth them out. A little too hot there on her neck. She didn't like that. So we always want to make sure to angle the blow dryer away from the head, and that's how that little nozzle works. And those nozzles usually come with your blow dryer, and they're a director, or they direct the air where you want it, so you can make sure you don't burn your kid when you're blow drying their hair. So I only need to do the blow dry in a very few amount of sections to get her hair smooth. If her hair was thicker, I would use more sections, although it is quite long, so I really want to make sure I don't wrap her hair around the brush and cause it to tangle. So I pick the hair up nice and clean in my pinky finger, and I just place it on top of the brush and pull it through. I don't spin the brush too much unless I'm working on the ends. And even then, the natural boar hair tends to smooth the hair out quite easily with little effort. So I'm just working on the other side here, blowing out all those curls, getting the hair nice and smooth, which is pretty easy. She's only about 5 years old, so it's pretty easy to smooth the hair out. I'm using a medium temperature on my blow dryer. If you're concerned about heat damage, just use a low temperature. The nice thing about the boar hair brush, which is actual boar, is that it creates a lot of tension in the hair, so you don't need quite as much heat in order to get the hair smooth. So the natural boar hair tends to work really well on children's hair. Also, because the bristles are very soft, if you encounter any knots, the bristles will glide over the knots pretty easily. Although with the ends tend to tangle a little bit, so we want to watch that. And here I am just spinning the brush through the ends to get them nice and detangled. And the director on the blow dryer helps, the air director, because you can use it to also direct the hair into the brush with the side of it. So I'm not spinning the brush until I reach the ends of the hair. So I kind of work from the root or the scalp to the middle and then to the end. So I used the brush in 3 different sections within each, or sorry, 3 subsections within each regular blow dry section. So I'll start by blow drying the hair at the roots, and once that's nice and smooth, I'll move to the mid shaft or the middle of the hair. And then once that's smooth, I'll focus on the ends. That way it reduces any risk of me tangling the hair around the brush, because I'm always working just in one area of the hair. And as each part of the hair becomes smooth, it tangles less and is easier to work with. So you can see how much more shine and how easy that was to get smooth with that brush and just a medium heat on that blow dryer. and just detangle the ends. And that's what I mean by the twisting. So you use your brush, you wrap the hair around the end of the brush, and then you just pull the hair through. The hair will stick to the brush, so that's how this works. And then in the front, I like to blow dry it all forward because that's how I like to do my haircut. Now we're just going to start our haircut by establishing a baseline or just trimming any length off her hair. You can see she doesn't have a lot of density through the ends as she's 5. So I only need to do this haircut in really only 3 sections. There's other videos where I've done the same haircut in more sections because the hair has been thicker, although just as long. So a lot of children like to have their hair long. And I find if you want to trim off just the minimum amount of length, it's good to do it on dry hair. And I find only children over the age of 5 will sit to have a hair blow dried. If your child is under 5, just have them stand and you can do this same haircut with them standing if they cannot sit. And if your child is quite young, chances are you only need to do it in 1 section. So just follow along, but just keep in mind that if your child has really little hair, it's just 1 section. Part it down, establishing the part, and then cutting the hair. So first we're starting in the nape area with her. I'm going and doing a little bit finer sections than I would if I wasn't doing a video, but this first nape area just helps me trim off any little ends right underneath. That first section, the hair tends to be really fine and a little shorter than the rest of the hair anyways. So I'll just skim off a little bit of hair to even it out. Keeping in mind that when I take this next section here around the ear, there'll be more density, so the hair will most likely be longer. And I can just ignore that first section and then establish just some length with this one if I want to keep her hair long. I'm just evening out the bottom and sharpening the hairline. So I'm just trimming off some ends. I've taken off relatively about 3 centimeters and I'm just going to use my fingers as a straight line first, and then I'm going to check with my comb to make sure the line is straight across. First, I measure with my fingers here on either side, and as I move up the head with my sectioning, I'll just double check it with my comb along the straight edge of my comb. So this next section is going in front of all the way from the center back all the way to either side of the temple, just above the ear. And if you're experiencing some tangling on the ends, just grab the hair in the middle shaft there, in the mid shaft, comb it down, and you can see there's my baseline. I'm going to follow that, trying not to pull too much tension on the hair. If you can, note 0 tension at all, and then follow the baseline of the previous cut that you did. And that'll be how you ensure that your cut stays even. But again, we're going to check it with the straight of the comb and just to verify that it is a straight line so that you don't have any sloping edges or pieces hanging down. And I usually work from the center to either side, and then that way I can check. So we're dropping the top section here, and I'm going with a middle section to cut it so it's symmetrical. But if you do a deep side part, make sure you're following that part when you detail the front. I've sectioned the front from the back just over the ears, so as a headband. So I'm working in the back first, and then I'm going to work in the front. Following my guideline here, this is why it helps to have the hair nice and smooth. So you can see exactly where you're working, you don't have any curls getting in the way. So working out from the center to either side, and then I'm going to check in my fingers to feel for any asymmetrical lengths because I want this even on both sides. So I check in between my fingers. You have to go by feel here, and then I'm going to verify the straightness of my line with my comb, and you can see I need to take a little bit of extra off. And she's moved her head a little bit, so now we've got to even that out too. This is why using your fingers is better when you're cutting a kid's hair, because they do sudden head movements. At least this way, if you have their hair in your fingers, then they're not going to ruin your haircut on you. So I've just dropped the top and I'm connecting the front to the back. I'm just standing by the shoulder here and I'm connecting the short hair from the back into the front. So you can clearly see where it needs to be cut there. And I'm just going to connect that whole side there together because the hair in the front tends to be less dense, so there isn't really much to cut off. And I find pulling all the hair, splitting the hair in the center back and pulling it forward is a very effective way to make sure the front is even and also symmetrical when you pull the hair forward. So I'm just checking here with my fingers, checking the symmetry and making sure the length is even before we move on to our unicorn layers. So we're taking our sections from the crown, starting from the mohawk, the top, or wherever the part line is. We're working from the back area to the front, and we're pointing our fingers in the same angle as a unicorn horn. So if you can picture that angle, that's how we're going to hold our fingers and over direct the hair to. So our first section here is going to be our guide. It is the mohawk section. I want this haircut to be symmetrical on both sides, so I'm taking this section right in the middle. And I've established where I want her length to be previous in the front. So the shortest part of this haircut is the front bangs area. And I've taken that mohawk section, I pulled the hair and angled my fingers to match the same angle as a unicorn horn, and that's where I'm cutting. That's why I call it unicorn layers, because now we're taking our next section, which is a pie-shaped section, much like a beach ball, and we're over directing, which means the hair is going to travel from one section to the previous, and we're holding our fingers at the same angle, so our fingers are pointing toward the floor, and the amount that our knuckles angle away from the hair at the crown is how much length there's going to be left over. So I tend to leave a lot of length because I like to go in and cut it shorter after, and I like to make sure that I can get the perfect length with the layers and I don't end up cutting too much off. Then by over directing the hair all forward and towards the center, you conserve the density of the hair at the bottom of the baseline where you've initially cut. So you conserve all of that length. And so you're just basically cutting very soft layers in around the top and around the face. And so I take she's getting a little tired of the hair in her face, but we're going to take our next section here just above the ear. We're over directing it forward and angling our fingers like so. And you can see I'm cutting off quite a bit of length here. She had no layers whatsoever. But as you can see, because I've been over directing the hair, she still has a lot of density in the baseline. And after that section of the ear, I just take this middle section here at the center back, and I'm following my guideline at the crown. Because this section is just to allow any sort of blending. Sometimes there's very little hair to cut off. As you can see, I'm angling the hair forward again and cutting just that corner out here. And that last bit that I've just cut off is where her base is, where that hair at the bottom. And I'm going to continue doing this same motion, taking these sections and then working forwards, because what I'm doing is I'm blending the hair from the front and center into the back. So it's connecting it, and you can see that's where the connection point is. And this is where I'm cutting off. And the hair that I finished cutting, that was the hair at her baseline. So as long as you're eyeballing that and not cutting into it, you'll be fine with your haircut. And I cut off about 4 inches of her hair off the layers. You can see she's quite amazed at that. It's quite a bit of hair we took off those layers, but because we over-directed them into the center and the front, it conserved all of the length on her end, so we didn't cut into it accidentally. And she has a little bit of curl in her hair, so because we've layered it now, it's going to make the curls spring or come out or be enhanced a little bit. So if any of your kids have curly hair, it's a really good idea to do this type of layering on it, and that'll encourage the curl because you're creating some shortness into the top. And she's doing pretty good after having all that hair in her face, I would say. And see, her hair is nice and long still, but she's got some movement and some layers in through the top, but all of the length is still intact. And now for our final part of the haircut, it's detailing around the face and just making sure it's symmetrical and even. And this will also remove any heavy corners that you'll see when you pull all her hair forward and look at it. So I'm going to blend the top front face framing layers into the base. And I do that by holding my fingers at an angle that preserves the baseline or the length of the bottom of her hair. And as I cut, I walk the scissors down the hair just like that. And if they don't like the hair in their face, they can always put their hand there like she's doing. And again, I'm doing from short to long, and I'm walking the scissors down the hair. It's a little bit more of an advanced method, but it's very, very effective for cutting and blending bangs. So you're essentially cutting palm to palm, having your palms face each other and then opening and closing the scissors. So our finished layers, you can see there's a lot of movement in her hair, and that curl's gonna be nice and bouncy when it gets wet, but for the meantime, it is nice and layered.